All right, welcome to distance learning, everybody. We're going to go through the rest of these notes that we had. It's the notes that started with the struggle for ratification, and we got through, all the stuff leading up to the Constitution, and we talked about the Constitution. Um, and now we're into the different articles. We went through Article 1, which was legislative branch, Article 2, the executive branch, Article 3, the judicial branch. And then most of the classes, you guys finished up with Article 4, which deals with the states. Just a brief overview on that. Understand now we have 50 individual states that have been unified to make one big state. Um, so that means that the states have certain powers, but they have to all respect each other. That's number one on here. I've got the example of marriage license on here. If a marriage license is issued in one state, that license has to be issued in all other states. We don't want somebody that is going to get married in Illinois, they move to Missouri, and then have the state of Missouri say, "Oh, sorry, you're not married anymore because you don't have our marriage license." Same thing with driver's license. Any of that stuff is all going to be respected by all the other states. And then we have all of these other things: conduct elections, govern schools, regulate businesses, all this stuff. Because remember, in the Bill of Rights, it says that any power not delegated to the federal government goes to the states, and that's how the states are going to end up getting all the different powers that they have. One thing to note is that a state law cannot undo a federal law, and we'll talk about that more later when we get into um, the legislative branch. Okay, Article 5 deals with amending the Constitution. The framers of the Constitution understood that the Constitution would likely need to be changed, so there was a process to do that. Right away, we get the first 10 amendments. They're going to come, immediately after, I should say immediately, a few years after the Constitution is ratified. An amendment it's simply a change to the Constitution. Something to keep in mind here: the Constitution has only been changed 27 times in over 220 years. That's one of those things that it's pretty remarkable when you think about it. 10 of those changes, right? That was the Bill of Rights right away. So really, we're talking about 17 changes. And then when you figure in the 18th Amendment, which says no more alcohol in the country, and then the 21st Amendment says, we're going to undo that. You can drink again. There's really truly been 15 changes that are still in effect in the Constitution. So, I mean, that's one of those things that just shows kind of how remarkable this document is. So, we talked about here, framers, they knew that changes would be necessary. Okay, we talked about that. In order to get an amendment passed, it's not as simple as just saying, hey, we want to make this amendment, majority in Congress. Okay, so we need a supermajority in Congress and in both chambers, and then it has to go to the states. And 3/4 of the states need to approve that amendment. So, to change the Constitution, it's more than just a law. This is something that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. So a change to the Constitution has to be something that pretty much everybody's on board with. Okay. As I mentioned before, talking about state laws and federal laws, we know that states can make and pass laws, and the federal government's going to do that. So which one is going to be more, which one's going to carry more weight? Okay, the supremacy clause in the Constitution, we're talking about Article 6, this is going to make sure that there is absolutely zero uncertainty about which law takes priority. Now, this has been questioned throughout history. If you go back to the Civil War time, learned in U.S. history, the Fugitive Slave Act. This was something that said, if you are If you're helping runaway slaves, you could be imprisoned. Okay, but then there were state laws that basically said if you didn't help them, you were going to be interfering with state business. So we get questions there. Okay, but no state can make a law interfering with the federal law. So if we would go back in time to the Civil War, we would find that really those state laws they weren't going to hold any water, and they would have been found unconstitutional. All right. So the Constitution is always supreme, hence why we call it the supreme law of the land. All right. Article 7 deals with ratification. This is like a one and done sort of thing. To ratify the Constitution, we had to have the procedure in there. We need 9 of the 13 states. They had to vote on and accept the Constitution. We know that we did get 9, but then we wanted all of them. Just to make sure everybody was on board, and eventually we get the Constitution. So Article 7 doesn't really apply anymore, but it's one of those things, if we don't explain how it's going to get ratified, then we're not going to know. All right. Let's talk about the amendments, a little bit of the amendment process. We've kind of already been over this, but you need to know, and especially when it comes to the Constitution test, amendments are changes to the Constitution. The Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments, the first 10 changes to the Constitution. And then since that time of the Bill of Rights, we've only had 17 amendments. The last one was in 1992. So again, it's not something that just happens every day. We don't just change the Constitution just because we feel like it. Doesn't matter if it's a Republican president or a Democrat president or Democrat Congress, Republican, it doesn't matter. To change the Constitution takes a lot of support from a lot of different people. All right, so we're going to talk about the concept of federalism. Federalism is the division of power between the states and the national government. All right. The federal government has certain powers that the states do not. Okay. The federal government can declare war. Okay. The federal government can make money. We don't have each state having their own currency. We had that before, and that was a pain. So it's the federal government. They are in charge of that stuff. Okay. Then we also have powers that both the federal government and state governments are going to share. One of them, collecting taxes. Okay, come April, you're going to have to pay your income taxes. You're going to pay both the federal government and you're going to pay the state governments. And when you pay the state government, that's going to vary based on what state you live in. Some states, like Florida, they don't even have a state income tax. All right, so that is up to the states how they want to do that. But states can also establish their own courts. States can also borrow money. There's rules on some of that stuff, but they have the power to do that. Okay, and then there's what's called reserved powers. These are the things that it's not in the Constitution, therefore it's going to be left up to the states. One of the best examples that I can give you on this is when Ron Paul was running for president. So this was back when texting and driving was a huge issue, and states were banning it. He was asked, should there be a national law banning texting and driving? And he said he checked the Constitution, and he didn't see anything in the Constitution about texting. He also didn't see anything in the Constitution about driving. Okay, so that means it has to be left up to the states. All right. Schools, police force, all of that stuff, that is going to be up to the state governments to decide how they want to carry that out. And that's why you get some police forces can do some things, others can't. It's going to vary by state. Schools are going to vary by state, what they cover. Okay, that's all stuff that the federal government can kind of give some guidance, but it's going to be up to the states how they want to carry that out. Okay, when we talk about separation of powers, we know that the legislative government, the executive branch of government, and the judicial branch of government, all of them are equal. Okay, so There's not one that's more powerful than the other. There's checks and balances. We've kind of been over that, how they can check power and do that sort of thing. But each of those branches is going to be equal. With that being said, as a whole, all of the states are equal to the federal government. Yes, the federal government can pass laws that states cannot undo, but we also know that the states have a lot of powers that the federal government doesn't have. So that's how we get that separation of powers and how everything's going to be equal on that. Bicameral legislature, that's a term that keeps coming up. Bicameral, remember, means two chambers. Okay, we have a bicameral legislature because we have two chambers. We have the House and the Senate. Okay, and here we're going to talk about checks and balances. Different ways that each of the branches are going to limit the power of the other branches. If the president's doing something incredibly wrong, at least that's the way it's supposed to be. They call it high crimes and misdemeanors. If the president is found to have been in violation of that, the House can impeach the president. It's a formal accusation of wrongdoing. It then goes to the Senate, and the Senate can vote to remove the president if needed. Now, it also goes for federal judges as well. So that's a way that Congress can have checks on the judicial branch and the executive branch. The president can check Congress because the president can veto bills. If doesn't like what they're doing, he can veto it, and then it makes it harder for them to pass. And then the courts, they get to check both branches because they determine whether or not Congress and the laws that they're passing, or the president and the way he's carrying out business, or the executive branch as a whole. But remember, it goes back up to the president. They can determine whether or not that stuff is unconstitutional. And if they find that it's unconstitutional, they have to change what they're doing. That is going to be it for this section of notes. Next week, we're going to dive in and we're going to look more at the legislative branch and just a lot of stuff that goes with that. I've got notes on that. I've got a couple of videos that we'll take a look at. And then you'll have a couple of worksheets that go with that too. So that'll be next week. Otherwise, have a great weekend, and hope to see you guys. We'll do a Google Meet next week. Hope to see you guys in person though, and hopefully in a couple of weeks.